On a cold February night in 2019, under the vast starlit sky of South Carolina's Lowcountry, an ordinary evening was about to turn into an unforgettable tragedy. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and marsh. 6 friends, full of youthful exuberance and carefree spirits, set out for what they thought would be a leisurely boat ride through the dark waters of South Carolina's Lowcountry. Little did they know, this night would forever alter the course of their lives. By dawn, as the first rays of sunlight kissed the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Mallory Beach was missing, vanished into the murky depths. And almost immediately, the Murdaugh name, a name synonymous with power and influence in the region, was thrust into the center of this unfolding tragedy, casting a long shadow over the investigation. The official story, the narrative presented to the public, Paul Murdaugh, portrayed as drunk and defiant, fueled by alcohol and a sense of invincibility, recklessly crashed his family's boat into a bridge piling, the impact shattering the calm of the night, ultimately ending Mallory's young life in a devastating and irreversible moment. But in a close-knit community that had been effectively ruled by the Murdaughs for generations, their influence woven into the very fabric of society, the truth surrounding that fateful night was far more complex and elusive than anyone could have imagined, a tangled web of secrets and hidden agendas. The group of friends, all underage and perhaps emboldened by the recklessness of youth, had left a party, the echoes of laughter and music still ringing in their ears, and boarded a boat owned by Alex Murdaugh, a prominent and powerful local attorney, a figure of considerable influence in the region. Around 2:20 a.m. the night descended into chaos, a violent crash, a frantic and desperate 911 call piercing the silence, and Mallory, tragically gone without a trace. First responders, arriving on the scene, found 5 injured and deeply disoriented survivors, their memories hazy and fragmented. Mallory's boyfriend, Anthony Cook, his voice filled with grief and anger, insisted that Paul was the one driving the boat. A desperate and agonizing search for Mallory stretched on for 7 long, agonizing days, each moment filled with mounting dread. Finally, her body was found miles away from the crash site, a somber end to the desperate search. The survivors' stories, however, were fragmented and inconsistent, their recollections clouded by a mixture of fear, trauma, and the lingering effects of alcohol. The central question loomed large: who was really at the helm of that boat in those critical moments? Anthony remained steadfast in his conviction that it was Paul who was responsible, but amidst the conflicting statements and shifting accounts, a sense of confusion and uncertainty reigned supreme. This pervasive uncertainty would haunt the investigation for years to come, casting a long shadow over every aspect of the case and fuel years of intense suspicion and speculation within the community, eroding trust and fostering a climate of doubt. Mallory's death was far more than just a tragic accident that claimed a young life. It served as the initial spark that ignited a firestorm, exposing deep and systemic cracks within the community's justice system, revealing a network of privilege and influence. The Murdaugh legacy, once seemingly untouchable and impervious to scrutiny, was suddenly thrust under the intense glare of media attention and public scrutiny, its foundations beginning to crumble. The devastating events of that night set off a chain reaction of unforeseen consequences, raising profound questions about power, justice, and accountability that continue to echo and resonate today. Was this simply a tragic consequence of a reckless act fueled by alcohol and youthful indiscretion? Or was it the beginning of something far more sinister and deeply rooted, a glimpse into a hidden world of secrets and deceit? The search for definitive answers, for the full truth behind that fateful night, had only just begun, promising a long and arduous journey. Paul Murdaugh, son of a prominent legal dynasty in South Carolina, carried the weight of his family's legacy. But he was also known for his wild streak, a penchant for pushing boundaries, and a seemingly unshakable sense of invincibility. The events of that fateful night, the night of the boat crash, painted a disturbing picture, with witnesses describing him as visibly drunk and increasingly aggressive, stubbornly refusing to relinquish control of the boat, refusing to let anyone else drive despite his condition. In the aftermath, his father, Alex Murdaugh, a figure of considerable influence, arrived swiftly at the hospital and began moving between rooms, engaging with the survivors, speaking to them at length before law enforcement could even begin their interviews. This immediately raised suspicions of potential interference. Was Alex acting as a protective father, desperately trying to shield his son, or was he actively obstructing justice to protect his family's reputation? The survivors' initial accounts of the events were riddled with inconsistencies and conflicted sharply. Anthony Cook and Morgan Doughty, in their testimonies, adamantly insisted that Paul was the one driving the boat at the time of the crash. Connor Cook, however, hesitated and seemed uncertain in his initial statements, later claiming under oath that he had been pressured by the Murdaughs and others to stay quiet and alter his version of events. These allegations of witness tampering and potential legal misconduct quickly became a central and highly contentious element in the numerous civil lawsuits that inevitably followed the tragic boat crash. The young friends involved were not merely passive witnesses to a terrible accident. They were also victims in their own right, deeply traumatized by what they had experienced, and many physically injured in the devastating crash, their memories of the night forever clouded and distorted by the sheer chaos and trauma of the scene. Their collective testimonies painted a disturbing picture of a night fueled by rampant underage drinking, and Paul's increasingly reckless and ultimately fatal control of the boat, fueling what would become a relentless and increasingly complex fight for justice for all those affected. The investigation was marred by missteps from the outset. No sobriety test was given to Paul at the scene, despite clear signs of intoxication. Officers seemed unsure how to handle the son of the county's most powerful family. At the hospital, Alex Murdaugh was allowed to speak with survivors before police, fueling rumors of a cover-up. Charges against Paul took nearly 2 months, an agonizing delay for Mallory's family. The slow pace and special treatment deepened public suspicion. Key evidence was lost and the crash scene wasn't properly secured. These failures undermined trust and set the stage for years of controversy. Years later, new details emerged, casting the night in an even darker light. Connor Cook testified he was told to keep quiet about who was driving, implicating Alex Murdaugh in a possible cover-up. Hospital footage showed Alex moving freely, speaking with officers and survivors. Evidence of interference, many believed. Morgan Doughty described Paul's drunken, violent alter ego, Timmy, painting a picture of habitual recklessness. These accounts suggested the crash was no accident, but the result of willful negligence. Still, crucial questions remain. Was law enforcement complicit or simply outmatched by the Murdaugh's influence? The truth remains elusive, and the community's wounds are still open. Until all questions are answered, justice feels incomplete. The confusion and alleged cover-up gave rise to alternative theories. Some suggested Connor Cook was driving, but his later statements, claiming he was pressured to feign uncertainty, undermined this. Anthony Cook and Morgan Doughty's immediate, unwavering testimony pointed to Paul. Another theory speculated a struggle for control of the boat, but no direct evidence supports this. These alternatives seem more like legal maneuvering than genuine doubt. The real mystery isn't who was driving, but why the truth was so hard to reach. The Murdaugh family's power cast a long shadow over the investigation. In the end, the evidence consistently pointed to Paul, and to a system willing to protect its own. Mallory Beach's tragic death marked not just the loss of a young life, but it was also the first crack in what many considered the impenetrable armor of the Murdaugh dynasty. A dynasty built on power, influence, and a legacy that spanned generations. The alleged cover-up in the boat crash investigation, the whispers and the doubts, foreshadowed even darker events that would soon engulf the family and the community in a storm of controversy. The brutal murders of Paul and his mother Maggie, sending shockwaves through the Low Country, and Alex Murdaugh's shocking and precipitous downfall from grace. The public's mistrust grew with each revelation, especially as Alex's elaborate web of financial crimes came to light, exposing years of alleged deceit, revealing a deeply ingrained pattern of deception and manipulation. The boat crash, initially dismissed by some, became the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the family's carefully constructed image of respectability and power. Prosecutors would later argue that Alex killed his wife and son, a desperate act, to distract from the mounting legal troubles that threatened to expose his financial misdeeds, including the looming boat crash lawsuit that threatened to bankrupt him. The community, once silent, now demanded accountability, not just for Mallory, whose life was tragically cut short, but for all the Murdaugh's alleged victims who had been silenced or ignored for far too long. The justice system, once seen as their impenetrable shield, a tool to protect their interests, now became their judge, holding them accountable for their actions. The Murdaugh name, once revered and synonymous with power, is now synonymous with scandal, deceit, and a shocking betrayal of public trust. The outcome of these landmark cases, the verdicts and the sentences, will undoubtedly shape public trust in the law and the pursuit of justice for years to come. Even with Alex Murdaugh in prison, the fight for justice for Mallory Beach continues. Her family settled their lawsuit, but their mission was always about truth, not money. The case shattered the community's faith in the justice system, but also galvanized calls for reform. Civil suits and new testimony keep the search for answers alive. Each revelation brings the public closer to understanding what really happened. Mallory's memory demands the whole truth, and a system that treats all equally. Justice isn't guaranteed, it must be fought for. The story of Mallory Beach is a call to demand better, and to never let power eclipse the truth.